Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Corey.
Here.
Councilmember Fullick.
Here.
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
All right, public comment. Anyone for public comment? No public comment.
Wow.
All right, well, I'll introduce our referee, Dr. Bob Lee.
I wore a striped shirt, by the way.
And I guess if, want to kick us off, or?
I think with that, Dr. Lear is our facilitator today, and he's going to walk through how the procedures are going to move forward today. And we'll have an opportunity for everyone of mayor and council to speak a little bit about your priorities for today, as well as your overall priorities for the city. And then we'll dive into each of the individual strategic priorities as well.
All set? First of all, thank you for inviting me here today. It really, really, really is a pleasure to sit at a table like this, a very informal setting, with people who have been, let's put it this way, who are willing to devote their time and make time in the short amount of time that we have in life, where time is your rarest commodity, to provide service for other people. So I want to commend you all for that. You all come with different perspectives, different experiences, different philosophies about how you make decisions, but you come together collectively, and anytime you get more than one person together, there's always challenges with decision making. And so that you get a group like of this size together, are we missing anyone?
Just our attorney.
Just the city
Or
attorney,
just
he's
the
on
city
his way.
attorney? Okay,
He's a buzzkill anyway.
Yeah, just.
don't worry about him. Anyways, it is a pleasure for me. Tell you a little bit about myself, maybe helpful for those who don't know me. Next year will be 50 years that I've been working in local government, or teaching or consulting in some capacity. And I like to think that every year I've learned and continue to learn something. I was a former city manager for about 26 years. One of my stints was in the city of Naples, where I retired from the profession in 2007. And I did that because I was asked to start up a new Center for Florida Local Government Excellence in Tallahassee. I did that for 15 years, but during that time I've been teaching. And since 2013, I've been a professor at Florida Gulf Coast University in their Masters of Public Administration program. Interesting enough, you have a couple of your employees who are excellent students, by the way, who are currently employed, that you currently have employed. Carissa's one, Nicholas another, that I saw here today. So it's always a pleasure to work with them as well, because of what I learned from them and the experiences that they bring to the program. Anyways, enough about myself. Today would suggest that we keep this quite informal, albeit I'm going to suggest a few guidelines that may be helpful in terms of facilitating our discussion. Well, let me start by saying what my understanding of my purpose today is to, at the end of the day, to have a product that would include up to eight strategic priorities. That's the current number you have, 8 strategic priorities. I believe you each have a copy of what those current strategic priorities are. Many different processes and how you can get there to that. Starting anew, taking existing ones, accepting what you have already because they seem to be working, wordsmithing each one, maybe amending them somewhat, combining a couple. I always suggest that cities have between 5 to 8 strategic priorities. So you're at the max. My point is, if there's some, you could have as many as you want. You're the body that makes that decision. But for the purpose of a best practice, that's what I recommend. meaning that there may be, if you do have something that's not listed here, that you think ought to be included, perhaps we could combine one or more of these strategic priorities into one. And I have several examples of other jurisdictions where I've actually gone through strategic planning processes with them, with the end result being strategic priorities being established. And most of those are in a compound sentence. For example, your first one, improve stormwater management. That's a compound sentence. It's a sentence, a full sentence. So it has a verb and action, improve, and they're doing something. But I've seen others with just have one word. It's like you have transportation. And then what follows from all of those will be some specific goals. You may have heard the term SMART goal or MAPS goal, where the goal is supposed to be specific, measurable, applicable. It needs to be time-bound. It needs to be realistic as well. And those are not what we're going to be talking about today. What we're going to be talking about today are the subject heads, the priorities. Once these 5 to 8 priorities have been established or reaffirmed of what you have, that enables staff then to go back in part of their budgeting and put together these SMART goals or objectives, whatever terminology you want to say, that support each one of them, so that they're given direction by the city council in terms of what they're supposed to be doing, in terms of how they're going to be measured, what the specific timelines are, how much it's going to cost, what are some goals related to that. But we're not going to get into those details in terms of making a decision today. Our decision is going to be on the strategic priorities, basically the topics, the titles that they're going to support. Again, many ways of doing this. My suggestion today is that you each take a few minutes. I'm going to take a time out here. Each take a few minutes and review these 8 strategic priorities and think about them from the standpoint of, I'm going to be asking each of you to speak for a few minutes individually around the table about what's important to you in terms of, for the city of Bonita Springs, and what those strategic priorities should be. I really would like to hear extemporaneous presentation from you all, because I'd like to know exactly what you're thinking. It may be very helpful from the standpoint of wordsmithing if there are any changes to these strategic priorities. It will help me in terms of making some suggestions to you all with that wordsmithing. But I think it's paramount for each other on in this group, as well as the citizens who have taken the time today to be here, sort of to hear your perspective without having parameters put to it regarding your strategic priorities, just generally. You may even get into a specific project or two. That's fine. That may help us better define these strategic priorities. So what I'd like you to do, well, let me ask you this before I close it. Are there any questions on that format in terms of, yes, sir?
Question, when you say identifying our 5 to 8 priorities, what is the time frame that you see for those? Do you see this as a 1-year priority, or do you see this as a...
Great question. I see those as multi-year. Many of the things that you do, and it could be 5 years, could be 10 years even. I do suggest that you would suggest that at some point that you consider going through a strategic planning process, that you start with engaging, bringing the citizens in and the staff and city council, and actually go through a process that may take a couple days. And you'll get to the strategic priorities. But these strategic priorities should be multi-year. It's the objectives or specific goals, these SMART goals I just referenced a few minutes ago, that support those priorities. Those would change every year because they're time-bound, they're measurable. They change every year. But these strategic priorities would be multi-year. Good question. Any other question? Okay, so what I would suggest, one other footnote, sorry I'm talking so much, but I want to make sure we have a meeting of the minds, so to speak. And if there's any questions on the process, let's get that covered up front. But at the end, in terms of deciding these, I want to make sure we're, taking each one, and so that this council has had an opportunity to review each one of these. This could be very, very quick. You could say, yes, we like them all. But if one member or two members want some change, then I may go with that and have some discussion and elicit conversation from the rest of you. So I want to make sure it's very respectful and respectful of your comments as well. So with that, what I would suggest you take a few minutes, just take a look, maybe jot down a few notes, because you're going to be giving a speech, so to speak, of what your thoughts are about the city of Bonita Springs.
I've been nursing after that.
I stole mine.
It'll take about 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started. Okay, we all set? Ready to speak? You know, one of the things I probably should do before you start speaking is quickly just review what these current 8 strategic priorities are, particularly for those in attendance here today as a courtesy so they know what we're talking about. And I'll quickly go through them. First one is improve stormwater management. Second one is transportation. Third is community aesthetics. Fourth is environmental protection. Fifth is strengthen, enhance city finances. Sixth is strengthen, enhance community relations. Seventh is government transparency. And 8 is economic development. With that, we can start anywhere. Councilmember Bogaz, you want to start with you? We'll just go around the room.
I believe that the stormwater management should stay our #1 priority, experiencing all the storms and such that we've had in the flooding. Transportation would be a key focus for me. I know we have lots of active projects, but I feel like we still need to really remain focused on that as we're growing so rapidly. And continuing to work on our downtown area, making it a destination and keeping it thriving and continuing that success. We've put a lot of efforts in downtown, and I'd like to see that continuing. Beach improvements, that's a really key thing, I think. It drives a lot of people here, and I believe right now I've driven down by the beaches, and they sidewalks you really can't even walk on at the current time. I understand we've had a lot of storms and such, but I feel like we need to maybe do some reaching out with Lee County. I know that they're involved in a lot of that also. So I guess that would kind of go with, relations with the county over our beach accesses also, making sure we have identification on those, seeing if we can figure out, we've talked about our signage down there, lots being full, et cetera, with, and the bathrooms are huge too. There is no public restrooms, so that's an area that I believe is important to focus on. Cell towers is a big thing too, I believe. I think that we need to, I know Chris has really been working on that, but it's something that needs to be focused on. There's lots of areas in the city that do not have great coverage. And a lot of people most people don't have home phones any longer. And if you have any emergencies and you're not able to get a hold of anybody, I'm afraid that that's going to become an issue. And of course, keeping our parks and pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly pathways are another great priority. And I mean, this is just a thought. 6 and 7, the strengthen and enhance council relations and government transparency. I don't know what that would look like if you combine those, or how we could possibly feel like they're kind of go together hand in hand, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much. Exactly what I was hoping that we would get.
I know.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes, sir. Okay, so I have it broke down to 5, but the first one has 4 subcategories. So you're gonna see similar patterns here, but I wrote, so for number 1, I have areas of advocacy, and then I have asterisks for these areas. So this is still under 1, these are subparts of 1. I have stormwater management, transportation, continued downtown development, and community aesthetics on major corridors. So when I'm saying major corridors, instead of having individual ones, what I mean is Beach Road and Imperial, where we're gonna take down that billboard. You know, I'm talking Marnie Fields, where we have the electrical lines going over as people are driving over. I'm talking Bonita Beach Road and 75, because people get off and they're like, oh, this is Bonita. We want it to look beautiful when they get there. Beach Road, we've talked potentially about at some juncture, trying to get the electrical underground on Beach Road. Our beaches are our best, one of our most lucrative components of where we live, so making that more aesthetically pleasing at some point. So point being, there are numerous areas, whether you're talking the beaches, Beach Road and 75, Beach Road and Imperial, the Marnie soccer fields, there's a lot of major corridors, and the reason I like to focus on these is because, yes, we know them intimately, but the people who don't know us, they see them all the time. So when they come here, I don't want them to come here and be like, wow, at the first light I come to, I'm sitting here looking at a dilapidated graveyard that has, you know, bags from Publix hanging on the fence and a billboard for an injury attorney. Like, I don't want that to be their first thought when they get here. You know, I have a major insight on the soccer stuff because my son plays for the middle school and for the Wildcats. And, you know, we have hundreds of teams from around the state who come here pretty much every single weekend. And they come to our facility and they're looking at a porta potty and they're looking at kids playing under the lights. You go to any of the rest of them, smaller towns, Estero, for example, who's 1/8 of our size, and many others around the area, you go in and these complexes are beautiful. And then they come to ours and they're like, oh, this is Bonita. And if this is the only part they ever have of Bonita, they're thinking about a porta potty and kids playing soccer under the lights. That is not what we are. We are way more than that. You know, there are so many beautiful parts of this city. So when I say community aesthetics on major corridors, that's the type of thing I'm talking about. Environmental protection is number 2, which there's a number of ways we can look at that, but I don't think being specific on that is super productive, because we had the Big Cypress Basin discussion a couple years ago. Then it was good to be involved in that, then it was bad to be. So, water, I think we can say water, and I think that covers the Gulf, and I think that covers the Imperial. And then I think at some point when we decide to address septic underground, that's also under there as well. So environmental protection, just kind of general. Permit-friendly processes. We have them. We do a great job. John and his team do an excellent job. Best in Southwest Florida after the hurricane, but we need to continue that. There was a long time, 10 years ago, even arguably less than that, where Bonita was not thought of as a business-friendly community. And we've come a long way in that, so I just want to continue ensuring that we have permit-friendly processes for people who are trying to do business with the city. That's whether you're trying to fix your lanai or whether you're trying to come here and build a business. I want the process to be as smooth and beautiful as it can be. Number 4, government transparency and I think / efficiency. There's a lot of ways that through the processes, whether we're talking the systems that we're using or people having to come in here to do specific paperwork, there's ways that we can be more efficient, and this will keep our eyes and ears to open to areas where we can be better. And then number 5, economic development and Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi challenge is what I put. And same thing as Jamie and same thing as Chris. I think we're in our 2nd or 3rd year of talking about how bad our Wi-Fi sucks. So I just want to figure out what we can do, how we can do it, and if we did nothing else, and we made Bonita Beach Road more beautiful, and we got functional Wi-Fi in the city, we could all be done in 4 years, and people would be like, hey, they did something. I think this is doable, so that's what I've got. Those are my 5.
Great, thank you.
Laura Carr. Again, improved stormwater management. Matt and team is always on this and will always be stepping it up and finding the best possible solutions. And And the beach regeneration has to be sort of a focus as well, because that is our number one, bringing in people for money. With transportation, I think it would be convenient and appreciated by citizens if the timing of the lights were adjusted when there's construction going on, so that the traffic can move and not get built up. So these are all tiny things that can be done, and I think easily done. And then the focus on economic development and transportation with keeping downtown a focus. I think it's time we have to plan for a parking garage, because in no time at all, well, I was at Fort Myers Beach and we drove around, and my actually husband had a handicap. There weren't even handicap parking. So you just drive around for 45 minutes trying to find parking. And that's going to happen once Collier Development gets in, because Sugar Shack is taken off. And then, Survey's busy all the time. And we have such great events. So it might be time to start thinking about a parking garage. And that could mean also developing the DRGR in a very functional and conscientious way.
Are those two different ones? Because those definitely don't go together.
Well, let's just let her finish, and, we'll get into this.
I just want to make sure I understand.
I'd like to know the status of BERT, and is it a viable, is it viable? Because I think we only have now a year left, so what's going to happen there? And how much are we going to throw at it if we can't get it? And if we can get it, how much do we need to throw at it? So I think that would be helpful. And Nicole and friends do a phenomenal staff, sorry. They're also friends, I know. They do a phenomenal job on our parks, and I think, though, we could add lights to streets and make it safer and get the potholes filled in. And I know Tony's a hassle and Matt's hassled by it because they're private streets, but they're still.
Were the instructions unclear? I'm sorry.
I'll pass. Jesse, you want to just take over the meeting?
No, I would just like to say.
Should Mr.
Wait, whoa, 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 whoa.
Dr. Bob leave?
Wait a second. Here's what I would suggest that we do.
We have,
I think-
supposed to give strategic
Jesse.
priorities.
Deputy Mayor, excuse me. Here's what I would suggest that we do. We each go around and give our thoughts, but you raise a good point. Some of these comments are going to generate some questions. And then what I would like to suggest that we do is ask the questions before we proceed, because there does need to be some clarification on some of the things that are brought up. But I would like to everyone to, without any questions being posed while they're presenting, to give them an opportunity to do that first. But again, your point's well taken about making certain that tells me that you're actually listening. And I think if we're listening to everybody, that's going to be very helpful. So did you have something more you wanted to say?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Mayor?
Yeah, so with the priorities, I guess, I know years ago, I think we had like a little more direction on each of the priorities. I know we had like beach access, things like that on there. And, now we're much more broad, which if we're looking at what we really want to get done in the near future, it's not really giving us that much direction, like we want to see a parking garage or we want to see beach access. But it does make it easier, as we're coming up with things that we want to see done, like it fits in a lot of these different categories. So we can show how it does meet our strategic priorities. I mean, I was kind of looking at them, I was thinking some of them don't really apply, but then when you think about individual projects, you see how they get in there, and it's like, well, it does apply because, like we want to streamline permitting, so that would be economic development. The access to water, beaches could be under the environmental protection, traffic and BERT, easily transportation. And, and the flooding would be the stormwater management. The strengthen and enhance council relations, I think that came, early on, where there was a lot of infighting, on the council. It's gotten better. We do have some things we need to improve, not being so condescending. But I think now it's more externally, we need to get along better with the county. We are a donor community, so we do want to see our money coming back to the city in projects. I did see the email from Dwight. He had some good suggestions on kind of combining a few things to make it, like you said, 5 would be better than 8, but 8 max. So we could combine some things, and it might make room for another one if need be. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the priorities that we have. But I don't know if we do want to have like a separate list of what we actually want to see accomplished in the short term, besides, just having the overarching, long-term priorities.
Thank you, Matt. Councilmember Corey?
Carry on from what Mike was saying. I think we have a complex government structure. And even for those that are initially on council for the first time, it can be difficult to quite understand how it all works. And I think the public is confused at times because you see a lot of people that, the city doesn't care about the schools. Well, wait a minute, the schools are run by Lee County. We need more fire protection. Well, wait a minute, that's sort of the fire district's responsibility. Well, how come I can't get potable water out where I live? Well, wait a minute, that's BSU. So I think one of the things that would help would be if we as a council could figure out a way to better inform the public as to what actually it is that we're responsible for and how we develop budgets to support those things that we are responsible for. I was reading a bunch of stuff on social media this morning about how the city has screwed up the negotiations over the school. And a guy that I know pretty well was writing all this, and you think to yourself, first of all, I haven't seen you come to any council meetings, but second of all, I'm surprised as a lifelong resident of Bonita Springs that you don't sort of get it. So, maybe we ought to do some things in terms of figuring out, whether in terms of our website, whether in terms of our individual reaching out to community groups, we can do a better job of informing people what it is that we're responsible for and how we go about trying to deal with it. I do agree that we have to do something to improve our relations with the county. As Mike said, we are a donor community. So if you have been reading the paper lately, you have seen the articles in the paper in terms of where the focus of the county is. And the focus of the county is in Northeast Lee County and in Northeast Collier County, Cape Coral. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent on airport renovation, the roads up to Babcock Branch, and Burke Store Road into Charlotte County. Other than the beach project that they are helping to fund, there's not a whole lot of dollars coming down here. We've been promised improvements on Bonita Beach Road, Hickory Island Road for a long time. We'll see if those ever happen. But somehow, we got to get those guys. And I think part of it is supporting the single-member district. People can argue about that all they want, but if the situation is you can get 5 guys live on the same block in Fort Myers or Cape Coral and decide to run for the county commission, and they could all be elected and live on the same block. That's the way it's set up now. So I think we have to take that into account. With respect to stormwater, I'd like to see us, we've been focused on management, but I think we got to start dealing with resiliency. I don't think these hurricanes are going to go away. think they're going to present a lot of challenges in the future. There was a tremendous amount of work done by the Resiliency Task Force back in '23. Unfortunately, I think that book that was produced is setting up on a shelf. And, we need to take a look at it, see what applies, and as a council, decide what sort of resiliency projects make sense. That's one of the reasons why I'm pushing for the grant that the state has, and we're looking for the appropriation for fiscal year '26 to see if we can get some resiliency planning money. So I'd like to change one to storm water management and resiliency. Transportation, I don't know of anything more important road-wise than getting the quadrant plan done and getting the state to make some decisions about what they're going to do on the east side of the quadrant and providing the funds necessary to get that thing done. Matt is moving ahead as quickly as he can, but we're still, if I remember right, Matt, we're still looking at probably 18 months before we start construction.
It hinges on negotiation Derek and I are working on.
Hinges on.
Property owner.
Well, with you involved, there's hope. With Derek, I don't know.
He's given, I mean, this is the first time he told me I had 18 months, so I'm already happy.
Oh, I don't
not the
know. But anyway, we need to get it done. We need to look at what we can do to encourage those governmental officials that are responsible for north-south corridors, whether it's I-75 or Three Oaks or Imperial, or if it's 41, because, I left my house at 10 minutes after 12 in Bonita Bay. I got here at 1:45. It took me 35 minutes to drive and I was at the front gate of Bonita Bay at 1:15. So, the noontime traffic around here is just terrible. So we need to do that. And we need to focus on rails to trails. Whether you consider that part of transportation, I will tell you that when they first opened the Legacy Trail up in Sarasota, they were anticipating about 2 million riders a year. Guess what? They got 6 million riders a year now. And that's not only providing recreation, it's providing transportation for people to go to work, and it's providing a huge economic benefit. So, we got to figure out a way to get that railroad corridor. We can't have this ugly scar running through Bonita Springs, not making it work for our businesses and our citizens. Environmental protection means to me water quality. So, whatever we can do to impact water quality, strengthens, enhance city finances. I think one of the things we got to do is we got to get our, work to get our discussions going with the banks or with the Florida governmental loan program to see what we can do about getting a line of credit. We simply have to be able to figure a way to increase our commitment to BERT so that we can get some serious grant money being considered. Estero's moving ahead. They're committed. This morning they went ahead with their meeting as city council, and I did not receive a phone call from John McClain, which meant that they're perfectly comfortable moving up their commitment to 15 million. Government transparency, I think we can probably improve some of that with respect to utilization of artificial intelligence to help people navigate through our website. I think we have a wonderful website. I think it's been award-winning, but it's like any other technology. It soon gets out of date, and one of the ways that some local governments are looking at it is, how can the user better access it? How can somebody say, what do I got to do to permit? Write a question in, and artificial intelligence dives through the website for them and comes back with an answer, instead of having to click through on links and everything else. And then economic development, again, it's rails for trails, and like Mike said, it's continuing to work with BSU and the fire district to streamline the permitting process. You know, it's the number, outside of the infill development, north of Shangri-La Road, and the traffic that everybody talks about, the most phone calls I get are concerning some issue regarding permitting or inspections, and I will say to our community development people, I understand 95 times out of the 100, it's gonna be because some contractor didn't actually file a permit, didn't actually produce a computerized drawing. It's not community development's fault, but, if we can somehow figure a way to streamline the process and get the three agencies that give permits working together, and I know they're working on it, but that's a priority. So that's my 2 cents.
Question, are we at this point, when somebody gets done, if you have a comment or a question, would you like us to do it then, or would you like us to save it till
I
everybody?
think it probably, there's different ways, but maybe for the purpose of, so we don't get bogged down in one presentation with questions, maybe if we all have a chance to just speak and take your notes where you have your questions, then I would suggest we'll go back around and people can ask questions of others for clarification purposes. I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, I think the questions are important now. Okay, Councilmember?
Nigel Folk for the record. First thing I want to do is everything that's on our strategic priorities, they should be there. In my 2 years on council, what I've seen and where we are right now is the fact that this is become a more collegial group. We certainly have seven very different personalities sitting here at the table, and some of us have similar passions and priorities, but at the same time, I think that's a good thing. And when I look at this, because of my background, a lot of times I tend to agree probably too much with Chris, but he likes numbers and so do I. To me, when I look at number 1, using the term resiliency, I thought to myself, why haven't I been using that? Because that is really what we're all about now. It's not about managing stormwater anymore. It's about becoming more resilient. And I agree that needs to remain our top priority. As far as transportation goes, I wish our citizens knew how limited we were by our control and ownership of the main arteries in our city. We just have so little control because they're not ours, much like the schools. So what I really want to focus on is, while it's important that we maintain a balanced budget, I want to start looking towards additional revenue sources beyond tax increases, and I think we can do that. Some of the projects that we have right now will actually bring multiple benefits to us, directly and indirectly. Number 1, by completing the revitalization of Riverside Park, the band shell, the Banyan Tree Plaza, those are going to be extremely important. But then I really want to see us pivot to utilization of current campuses that we have opportunities, and that's specifically the community pool area, the ballparks, the soccer fields that Jesse had brought up. They now and will drive business to our merchants, but looking to enhance those, and I would encourage everyone to be imaginative. I'm so tired of talking about people saying Little Bonita Springs, but we have a campus where the community pool is right now. By expanding that and making it I don't want to say an Olympic venue, but the Olympic-sized pool, which allows competitions, the amount of revenue that comes into the city of Fort Lauderdale from one pool in the hundreds of thousands of dollars is staggering. We can do that here for our community. It brings additional benefits, but it drives revenues, and it becomes a revenue source for the city. The ballparks, having these traveling, not shows, I'm sorry, they're festivals for the younger people. We have it with hockey, we have it with baseball and softball, and we're talking millions of dollars. And I sit in the TDC meetings and look at some of the other communities that are getting direct and indirect revenues, utilizing some of the resources they have now and what they're building on. So I really want to look at our Parks and Rec department as possibly a source of revenue in the very near future. And it's been brought up, and I'm glad somebody else brought it, but if not now, when do we start looking at parking as a source of revenue? And I probably would have disagreed 2 or 3 years ago with a parking garage, but I was stunned to find out from one of our sister cities that their average revenue, net revenue on a parking spot in their city, if you want us to guess, is just over $12,000 a year per parking spot. That's hard revenue. That means we aren't taxing our people, and we're getting revenue that'll help us grow and provide sources. So I think, to both Laura's point and others in the community, it should be a short-term goal and not necessarily a long-term goal. And finally, again, people talk about transparency of our government. It's hard to lead a horse to water, and then it's really tough to make it drink. I don't know what else we can do, but we have highly educated citizens who can't seem to even go to the website or pick up a telephone to find out what's going on. So how we educate our citizens to what we're doing, maybe that does become a bigger priority, but I certainly don't know if the website's going to be the solution, Chris. Thank you. Jim?
Thank you. Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. I thought about this for the past week because one of the things that my biggest concern in running for this was this whole position, and having been here a whopping 4 months, was looking at how we have grown the last 25 years and how we started from virtually nothing to the point where we're at. My hope is that whatever today's event turns into becomes a foundation that quite honestly results in that strategic plan where all of us collectively within the next 12 months can sit around as a council and ratify a document that would say what would like Bonita Springs to be 25 years from now, and that we put our tactical and growth plans that match that, so that as we move forward, at least over the next foreseeable future, that we've got a map and guideline that we're going to try to operate to moving forward. What I've observed both during the campaign and since joining council is we have a number of items that come up on a one-off basis. And I've got a fundamental concern stepping back and saying that I see revenue tightness coming up. I see concerns about where future revenue comes from. I see gaps in projects that were evaluated and estimated years ago and now coming to fruition, that we're going to have financial gaps in what we have to come up with, whether it's Riverside Park or the Banyan Tree Park. All of those things all have values in our assets to the city that we have to go ahead and contemplate. Thinking globally, I started from the standpoint that we're 58,000 people. And if we grow at what they say of 1.4% growth, 25 years from now, we're going to be over 82,000 people. 82,000 people. Where are they going to go? And then I looked at what are our assets that we have to consider in every decision as council members and staff. One is our beach and waterways. And this is in no particular order. Two, it's our Route 41 and Bonita Beach Road business corridors. Three, it's our downtown district. Four, it's our existing city parks and recreation areas. And then five, it's our natural resources, primarily east of 75. These are the assets that we're left with today, and we have to make decisions on moving forward as to how we manage, care for these, protect them, maintain them going forward. They're not real sexy things, but they're nutsy, gutsy things that have to be addressed in each of our budgets each year. So my priorities in terms of what I support, for the benefit of all residents, businesses, and visitors, is really, I guess it's this resiliency thing. I've changed it from improved stormwater management and emergency management as the one comprehensive plan. I do believe that the work that was done by our predecessors in 19 and 20, in terms of the first stormwater plan in 19, the subsequent more focus on water quality, needs to be revisited and updated to identify key initiatives where our flooding risks are and identify those priorities that we need to incorporate into our capital plan moving forward. Transportation is always going to be there. I wish all of us could go ahead and wave a magic wand and say we can make it happen, but again, it's a priority that we need to step on whoever's responsible for getting stuff to move. And then lastly, from my priority standpoint, is what are the initiatives to protect, maintain, and improve our city's assets and facilities? I look at some of our facilities, we haven't done the maintenance, we haven't done the support, we've been given facilities that weren't well maintained before, that are gonna either fall around the shell, or we gotta make investments to it. And these are hard decisions that we all need to go ahead and take a look at. Tactically, review and update our stormwater and water quality plans with the objective of identifying key initiatives which need to be implemented. Rebuilding our emergency and storm reserves. This is an issue that Chris brought up this past summer. We have woefully drained those down that if, God forbid, something happens in the next year or two, we're not funded to the level we were pre-Irma. 3, we need to do a detailed review and analysis for our next 10 years of our CIP plan, with the objective of understanding the resources that we have for funding our city operations, capital improvements, and the ongoing maintenance of our facilities. This should also identify potential funding gaps and the potential opportunities for increasing revenues. Next, to touch on the transparency piece, and I put this down as more of a, quote, community engagement and communications. We rely upon notifying of meetings like this, and or for zoning purposes or for comprehensive plan purposes, as putting that little tombstone ad in the newspaper. Why do we do it? Because it's required. We need to figure out how to get our community engaged, how we get greater involvement and feedback from our citizens so that we can go ahead and do that. And that means a variety of things. There's proactive outreach, whether it's our Facebook page, whether it's texting, whether it's emails, for topics like meetings like this, so that there is broad awareness of what's going on. And I'd like to finally, at some point in time, sit down and discuss our downtown district. What you and your predecessors have done is something short of fantastic for our downtown. But seeing a variety of the projects that have presented in terms of our infill and growth and taking advantage as to what we've built downtown, I think we seriously need to go ahead and consider an expansion of what we classify as the downtown district, so that we're looking hard at density, we're looking hard at zoning, we're looking at a variety of issues, that 6-8 blocks east and west of Old 41 and possibly up to Arts Bonita. These are all portions that will naturally grow from the core foundation that we're at today, and how we put residential units within that 6-8 blocks of either side of 41 are going to be critical in our decision-making going forward. And also, I would like to do a formal review of the land use map that's tied to our comprehensive plan, to Laura's point, and have the hard discussions about how we've designated future land uses, what remains in our city today, and have those discussions. And if everyone's on board with where that future land use map is, then we all try to go ahead and identify a codification of what that map is, so that as people come before us, we know what we want, where our growth to be within the city. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great discussion. I mean, it's one thing to just talk about these strategic priorities, but what I really liked was you got into some of the details, the things that were on your mind that support the strategic priorities. And one of the things I'm going to suggest after we finish, matter of fact, I'm going to be making notes while we're continuing these discussions, is there's certain items that seem to be on the immediacy in terms of people's minds that they'd like to get done in a short term. And those are items we could identify for workshop items. If there's a consensus by the group to place an item onto a workshop, this is a good forum in which we can have that discussion so that staff can plan accordingly. They can even provide, some of these may be more easily set up because there's not as much information or staff follow-up needed, where others may take some time or may be dependent upon something else that's going on. So I like the fact that we got into some detail. What I would suggest at this time is, and I appreciate the courtesy of letting everyone speak, and Deputy Mayor, I really appreciate how you started with the questions which we needed to do, but then we were all waiting for everyone to speak, and now we can have this kind of dialogue. What I would suggest is that anything that you heard from somebody else, if you have just a question on it, it's not, this isn't where we're going to debate that one item, particularly if it's one of these subsections of these strategic priorities. The debate will go on at a workshop. But if there's a question on what was intended, I think this would be a good time to have that conversation. And I would suggest the way we do this, since we went around this way, maybe we could start with Councilmember Corey and go this way, and then Mayor Gibson and go this way in terms of questioning anything that anyone else has said that you want that you have a question on. If you don't have any questions on what they said, say thank you very much, and we'll move on to the next person. But Councilmember Corey, why don't we start with you?
I don't really have any questions about what anybody said. I think one benefit of the way that the council is operating now is that, you know, for the most part, we're on the same page. Maybe we're only 90% on the same page or 80%. But, you know, I think as we work and talk together, we are going to be more unanimous than has been historically the case over the last 5 years. So I'm just glad to be able to hear what people say and, you know, look forward to working with people. But I really don't have any questions as to what they had.
Well, let me add a footnote to that, because one of the things we're going to be doing is adapting here to whatever seems to be the preference the best we can. And I think that's what a workshop should be. It shouldn't be too structured. If there's something that you didn't say, that you heard some others say that you want to reemphasize, reinforce, that's fine too. I like the fact that you made some comments about the importance of working together. And when I heard you say, although not directly, seems to be a lot of agreement on some things. It's going to make the job, rather than focus on what you disagree on. Today, hopefully, we can focus on what you do agree on. That's generally a lot easier. And those things that you don't have necessarily an agreement on, but you feel is important, that would be a good workshop item, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just think it's important that we focus on what we all do agree on and, you know, like, and respect each other's views. But if there are things that we're split over, we'll set them off to the side for a meeting or something, and we'll get to those later. But let's not waste a whole lot of energy on what we don't agree on.
Right.
I think the way this council is now elected and functioning, we're going to be able to accomplish a lot because we can talk to each other.
I think it's important, if there is a difference of opinion, to reference that today, so we'll know that's something that we may need to workshop. Or it may be that as only one person feels a certain way, but the consensus of everyone else is they don't want to deal with that particular subject. But it doesn't make sense to workshop it necessarily if no one else is interested. But if it's a good idea, respect that, and you can make that decision later. But anyways, Fullick, Councilmember Fullick.
I did want to bring up, but I don't think it really emphasizes enough in talking about revenues and our budget. Initially, I looked at Rails to Trails as an opportunity to provide quality of life and maybe enhance the look of the city, but in the research and listening to different people talk about it, the opportunity for this to become a alternate source of transportation, and not in the not too distant future, looking at as a corridor for light rail without removing the trail portion that it is combined like it is in so many municipalities around the country. But again, it's incredibly important that that's something that we would have control over. And I just think that we've all been thrown a curveball, whether the public realizes or not, by both the county and in some cases, folks on the state level. But we can't allow ourselves to be disappointed by that. We need to move forward with alternate sources to make that happen, because I think that is one of the linchpins for both our downtown and ourselves as a city.
Thank you.
Jim?
Councilmember Fitzpatrick.
I share a lot of the thoughts about opportunities that sit before us. I think I love the concept and discussion of more cell towers and providing grading Wi-Fi capability to fill the gaps. I think that that's just a major potential revenue resource for where those could be on public land, but also for encouraging under the proposal that Chris had put out there about cell tower heights and so forth, to expedite the process to get those in place. I'm sure it will cause some angst and consternation behind the gates, but I think it's a realistic topic that we need to at least put out there and have that discussion. I love the consensus that's been put around our park and recreation facilities. I would just like to go ahead and see where we can find the money to sustain the maintenance and improve where we can those facilities and create a greater awareness of those facilities to the entire city. Again, my underlining concern of all of this really does center around an adult discussion about our revenue stream for the next 5 to 10 years, the impacts of the economy, property taxes, and so forth, and having that adult discussion about where our revenue comes from to support all of these great ideas that we have put out here.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Gibson.
Mike is fine, but yeah, no real questions. Just, we did have a lot of overlap on what we brought up, so I think it's a very good starting point. So.
Let me just say, this is a workshop, and I said that it's going to be informal, and I've been calling you council member and then the last name. So unless anyone objects, first names are better for me. So,
All in favor?
all in favor? Okay.
No voting, it's a workshop.
I can actually pronounce those better, too. Laura?
Agreed with what most people have said. I would like to have clarification on our finances and from Lisa at some point, because Nigel pointed out we needed to increase our reserves, and we did so by $1 million. So the last report, we had $2 million in reserves, and maybe Lisa can extrapolate the returns we're going to be getting from the buildings that are going to be going on. I really think that our city's in a great place and that we can focus more on downtown and making it the destination. And bird trails will be a transportation for others, especially for workers who are biking and cycling to their jobs. So, and people put little dices up, so it'll bring in an income. But we're definitely going to have to do the parking and discuss the DRGR issues in terms of how we develop our little remaining property that we have, while at the same time improving flood mitigation.
The question on the finance is something basically for a staff presentation as part of a workshop or whatever, to get into the nitty-gritty of that, explaining the reserves, because that's a real important point. Reserves, Government Finance Officers Association has basically 5 different types of fund balances. And I remember going to a city that thought they were in good shape until they looked at and identified where they were with each of these types of fund balances. And the undesignated fund balance was actually in the negative for that particular city. So I think having that kind of discussion is really important if you're talking about planning for some expenditures. So, Jesse?
Yes, number one, let's Chris, I liked everything you said, but I will come back to one point. And I understand why you're saying the single-member districts thing. I think that, okay, so we want to work on a relationship with the county. The last thing we want to do is tag in on the opposite side of a food fight that they're in with the state. Because we need money from the state, we need money from the county. There are mortal enemies on this right now. Cecil will not be pleased if we tag in with Batana. Batana will not be pleased if we tag in with Cecil. Since we need money from both of them, in my opinion, staying out is probably our best route. I loved everything else you said. Number two, nobody said it out loud, but the Good Bread store needs to go away. We need to figure out.
What?
The Good Bread store, that probably needs to go away. We have to figure out an action.
Good bread store?
Yeah, it's called the Good Bread Store. It's a formerly historic building that has been, I think somebody called it the largest paperweight in America, I think, the other day. So it's a building. It used to be the only gas station between Tampa and Miami a long, long time ago. And then we got the good idea to move it. And when we moved it, the historic value went away. And then we put it in a great geographic spot. But literally, it's a shell of a building, and it's just eating up space. And nobody wants to rip off the Band-Aid because we love it, and it's been here forever, but we have to do it at some point. Or we have to have the discussion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everyone disagrees. But I think we have to have a discussion on that one. Then last, the parking garage. I love this. I just think we got to figure out, so my initial thoughts are going vertical at the library, because the library is, there's a bunch of spots already, but if we went vertical there, literally everybody could be walking to the downtown. Better than some of the spots that are closer right in the middle of the downtown, I feel like that kind of constricts us in there a little bit. If we're at the library, which nobody's utilizing anyway for the most part, if you look at proportionality that it's used in comparison to how many people we have, we have 15 people weekly going in there, and we have hundreds of spots, and if we go vertical, we could have way more. So we're at least utilizing the space for something useful, and it deals with a need. Now, I understand we own that with the county, so there may be, discussions to be had, but that's my first place that I think makes the most sense. And my second place would be the bioreactor going vertical there. So, and we already own that. So I think both of those are good options, and they're not directly in the way, but they give direct accessibility.
Thank you, Jesse. Jamie?
I don't have a whole lot of questions either. I liked Jesse's idea of putting in, identifying our corridors and, making those a priority. Where are we? I know we discussed it out of Albany Beach Road and the signage and the billboard. I know it's with Lee County, but I know we discussed it.
We have to bring it back up because our partner on that was Ray Sindelli. And so when he left, pretty much, it's now Moloka's baby. So I think we have a meeting coming up with Molika where we will then discuss trying to get that back on track, where they do a 50-50 split with us, and we figure out buying out the contract and all the rest. We already have the renderings, and I think we even voted on approving the renderings. So we just got to get Commissioner Molika caught up to where Ray was at, I think. And actually, honestly, the best way to do this is we probably have Ray call Dave. I can call Ray. Ray can call Dave. Hey, this has been going on with the city before you got here. We've already voted on, the city's already voted on it. Here's what it looks like. I told them we'd get it over the, finish line, and I'd appreciate if you would carry that on in my legacy. And I'm sure Dave would be amenable to that. It's not a huge ask, but for us, it's a big deal because it's the first light when you come in, so.
And the Good Bread store, I agree that discussion needs to happen with that, and I agree it should probably go, but discussion on that. But other than that, I agree. I think everybody had great points and thoughts.
Great. Before we move on, and by the way, I don't know what you do in terms of breaks. Maybe shortly take a 5-minute break if you need to. Or, yeah. So why don't we, may I ask you just to give the courtesy, I want to ask the city manager, is there anything you want to add before we go to break, or contribute, or question, or anything?
No, the only thing I maybe just wanted to add is I appreciate the comments that that the mayor made regarding the fact that the strategic priorities are sort of limited in their statements, and that we did originally have many projects, and as those projects got completed, they shifted or they became obsolete to what was happening at the time. And I think for staff, it is easier for us to have that 30,000 level view of pinpoints because so many projects that are actually required by the state or required by other entities, they do fit into those, and then we're able to explain how they fit into your strategic priorities. So when we make those asks of requirements that we have to provide from the staff, I think it helps bring it back into the whole scale of what you're trying to accomplish. But I do agree that the bullet points that goes underneath those should be reevaluated more regularly as well. And as they slide in and slide out, that's how we would kind of, but I do remember the process of how that was before. And I think those are important details, but maybe not in the actual strategic priorities. When we publish these in the budget and in the CAFR and all the other financial reports, this is what those decisions are based on.
But basically, strategic priorities, everything should support one or more of them. Maybe a project that supports more than just one of those. Or maybe a good economic development project, or maybe aesthetics, improves aesthetics, may even have a stormwater portion of it, maybe it's a retention area with a walking trail around it or something. So what I've seen a number of jurisdictions do is every item that comes before the city council must support one or more of their strategic priorities. If it doesn't, they shouldn't even be talking about it. And that's one way to keep focus and let the citizens know what you're doing as well. Someone did mention about strategic planning process, and that's something that maybe you want to have a workshop on too. Talk a little bit more about that as well. But what I would suggest is that we take a little break, 5-10 minutes, and let's get back onto this, and then we're going to start looking at these strategic priorities specifically now that you've had an opportunity to just sort of brainstorm a little bit about those things that are important to you in the city. Thank you.